Jeffrey, you gotta get a second from somebody.
That was an aggressive lift like that. Come on, break the record, Jeff. Oh, this is 10 seconds, 12 seconds, 15 seconds. Over the record. Oh, my God. It's a new record. Let me have the mic. Can I have the mic?
So blow, Seminole wind, blow like you're never gonna blow again.
Well, I'm here. I'm not sure where Corey went. He was supposed to come out here. He's supposed to be here for this big win. The Noles had lost. Oh, it's coming in hot.
I made it.
Team again.
Cheers! Go Noles!
Go Noles!
Hi guys, nice to see y'all. It's been a long time.
And away we go. Welcome in. Good morning to everybody. Warchant Game Day on a Saturday when Florida State plays their first true road game of the year. I'm Jeff. That is Tom. He's on your screen. So am I. And a good day to you, sirs and ma'ams. Hopefully, if you've been affected by the storm, you are coming out of it now. We seem to be doing pretty well here in Tallahassee. Cameras don't have power yet.
Sorry.
Okay. Cameras don't have power yet. And the whole city has power. But just when you get high on the horse and think you're somebody in this town, buddy, go ahead and lose power and be the last one to get it back on.
I'm sorry. When you said we seem to be doing okay here, I knew you couldn't resist. I knew, and I lost it. That's my fault for not being strong enough in that moment. We did just get a text from the city of Tallahassee saying that
Jeff Cameron's power is coming back on in mere minutes.
That is correct. The city is only willing to confirm 94% of the town.
Oh, yeah. Wearing it. Go ahead and just bend over, Jeff. But here's the thing. I understand grateful can turn to petulance quickly. In my case, as patience is relative, and mine stretched into a pretty, a long period there, Tom. I was pretty good. But by the time I woke up this morning when my eyes cracked open at 5:40 and we still didn't, I was like, it's hot in here. As you can imagine. So anyhow, that's not why you're here. You're here to talk about that big Noles win on the road tonight against SMU. So let's get it on. Today's pregame show brought to you by Hotel Indigo Tallahassee, College Town. Whether you're a frequent guest, a business hosting your event, or stopping by the restaurant, bar, and rooftop before an FSU home game, Hotel Indigo Tallahassee wants to thank you for your continued support and being part of the family. If you want to host your next event, by the way, with the best view of Doe Campbell in the entire city, and that's true, call Jay Green, 850-755-9011, Hotel Indigo Tallahassee. Welcome to our neighborhood. Well, it's an imminently winnable game, Tom. I will say, going back over, I know you've done it. I have too. We do our due diligence before we come on these shows. I don't like SMU's offensive line at all. And I really think that's an area that if Florida State's going to win tonight, let's start with the positive here, guys. I mentioned it's first true road game. Atmosphere should be good tonight. Intense. That this is an SMU team that really wants this win, obviously, as they start their ACC campaign. But I do think their offensive line presents problems for them. And that Florida State's defensive line really came on last week, has been coming on the last couple of weeks, looks like a group of beginning to play with confidence and strength and health. So it could be interesting to see if Florida State could wreck this offensive line and get Keith Jennings off platform, which he wants to be anyhow because he's not a really good pocket passer. What he really does want to do is run around. But if you're able to secure that and get him to the ground, I think you got a chance to keep this low scoring, just much like you did against Cal, and get a win. I think that's the really modus operandi for Florida State until they show otherwise on offense. You got to go into these games thinking that Florida State can win if their defense carries the day. you got a shot at it today because that's not a great SMU offensive line.
No, it isn't. And the quarterback's name, I'll tell you, this is funny. This is a funny aside. He's Kevin Jennings, not Keith Jennings. But if you make him look like Keith Jennings, we're in business here today, buddy. I think that this is one again where, we talk a lot of times about different sports that we love on the weekday show, the Jeff Cameron Show, weekdays 1 to 4 here on Warchant TV and 93.3 FM. Different sayings and different concepts because sports is universal. A lot of things you learn from one sport makes you better at the other. And there's one saying that, stuck with me because it meant a lot to one of my teams, which is good is the enemy of great. Well, I want to flip that on its head for Florida State. Technical is the enemy of physical because it looks so often. You watch a game like last night where maybe Miami's not as good as people thought. Maybe Virginia Tech is better than they looked against Vandy. Maybe it's a mixture of the two. But you see two teams.
They're both true. That's accurate. That they're both true, Tom. Yeah.
So, but those are teams that play fast. Those are teams that play physical. And if there's a mistake, so be it. I'm picking up 3 or 4 yards. Or if there's a mistake, so be it. I'm doing that in the opponent's backfield. I'm bringing pressure. I'm going at full speed. And it just seems so often for this team, especially at the second level of the defense, especially with the offensive line, the way we want to block with gap. We try to be so fine and technical and perfect and angular rather than just saying, I'm faster than you are, I'm stronger than you are, and I'm going to make a play. And if I make a mistake, I'm going to make a mistake at 100 miles an hour, but more plays are made that way than trying to be technical and cute and fine and perfect. That's, to me, the key for today's game on both sides of the ball. I mentioned the offensive line, but for defense, that's true as well. This is not a group at SMU that's littered with elite athleticism. They have one dude that scares the hell out of you in Brashard Smith, and he should. But they don't have a ton of players like that. So get downhill, communicate, and then if you're not sure, do something fast. Do something powerful. Because chances are you've at least, at the very worst, shrunk the gap for your opponent to make a play, and it's a gain of 6 instead of a gain of 20. That's what I'm hoping to see out of Florida State today.
You guys might remember, Tom just referenced him, Brashard Smith, the running back for SMU. You might remember him with the University of Miami. They've got several transfers from the University of Miami or kids that played in Miami. Brashard was an elite special teams player while at Miami, really not much more than that. Is a fast athlete, is a kid that if you give him some space can make plays. So you see a guy like that, you circle him, you understand that he's a playmaker. You got to get him to the ground. R.J. Maryland is Russell Maryland's son. If you're old like me, you remember Russell Maryland's dominance at the University of Miami. You remember his dominance in the NFL. Played for the Dallas Cowboys, Tom. He was a great player for a very long time. R.J. Maryland is a tight end, and that's the guy that I'm going to bring up because he has had one great game this year, but if you watch, and that was against Nevada, but if you watch him, you see that the potential to have many great games with even a decent thrower of the football is there. And they haven't had that. Stone wasn't that. Jennings necessarily isn't that. But I will say that's a kid who I think Maryland is going to probably play in the league, Tom. He's 6'4", 245. He can run. And listen, it bears repeating over and over and over again like a broken record. We don't cover tight ends. Not well. And I would think that a kid who's capable of that could have a very big day against us today because he's good against teams who do cover a tight end. I can only imagine what he's going to look like today. We'll see. If Jennings is running around for his life, it may not matter. And that's why we talk about the whole key to the game being Florida State's defensive line. I said it last week before the Cal game. We looked at that Cal group and we said, well, I think they're disciplined on defense. I think they tackle. I think they're sound. I think they're fundamental. I think they know what they run and they run it well. But we like the matchup against their offense. Now, their quarterback is better than our quarterback. Every quarterback we faced this year is better than our quarterback. That might not be the case for the first time this year, Tom. I feel like we may have an even matchup at quarterback today, buddy. That'd be nice. That'd be nice to see. Now, their quarterback is much more mobile.
Yeah.
So are Snails than ours. But, hey, there you go. You know, these things, that's part of it. But he's not a great thrower of the football. So as we give you a quick cursory glance to start the show of the offense and defense for SMU versus Florida State, you kind of see that there are matchups to exploit here. There are opportunities here. I'll be very intrigued today, Tom, if Florida State does away with the slow developing stuff and really comes at him again, inside zone, hat on a hat, let's go, let's block, let's go straight ahead and make some plays in the run game. Got to win first down with a lot greater frequency than they have so far this year. They've been one of the worst at it is Florida State. If you can win more first downs today early, get it 2nd and 5, whole playbook is open to you at that point. You can really become a play action team like you wanted to be at that point. You can roll DJ out and get him throwing on the move. I actually think he throws well on the move. These are the kinds of things that I'd like to see happen. I've wanted to see a lot of things happen. We'll see if it does today. They've got an opportunity here, I do believe.
They do. This is, again, where technical is the enemy of physical or the enemy of powerful. When they get downhill, when they use split zone or inside zone tendencies last week, they were pretty successful. They were okay with counter last week too. Okay, which I hope isn't like some sort of carrot that's dangling before the coaching staff. Man, the other stuff was very successful getting downhill. And that's just look, next week against Clemson, you got to be technical. No, well, like, it's just that's a week where you got to be technical and perfect and maximize potential.
You're get your ass kicked.
And all, but you got it. That's those things you have to stack up like a house of cards, right?
Yeah.
In a windstorm. And poor choice of words this week, but that's what you have to do against Clemson. You got to be perfect and technical and all that stuff. You don't have to be this week, and that's the frustrating thing is you didn't have to be against Memphis, and yet I felt like there was no pulse whatsoever out of the offense for the Memphis game. Like you come out of it, you say, what did we do? The answer is nothing. They had less than 70 yards. Was it 64, 66 yards in the first half against Memphis? Last week, there's a pulse, and we lauded their linebacker play at Cal, and we lauded how technically sound and the gaps that they played with great leverage, and they did. But Florida State had 130 yards in the first 18, 20 minutes of that game. They were moving the football. The problem is when a little adversity hit, they turtled. And you've got to be mentally tougher than that. And that's really frustrating. They also fell in love with counter in the middle of the game. I'm not saying never call it. I'm just saying it's not your best play anymore. And for God's sake, how much evidence do you need that it's not your best running play anymore? So hopefully today, this is an opponent where you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to stack up technicalities and tricks on one another. This is an opportunity where in the trenches, you go straight ahead and you go make some plays.
Yeah, it's a team still searching for an identity on offense. I think we know they've simplified this defense as well as you can. I mean, it's not a complex defense. You'd like to think year 5 you'd be able to teach zone at some point, but they really don't. So we know what we are defensively, where we let our athletes make plays. They've gotten slightly better at communicating on crossers. I was shocked that we didn't really see a lot of efforts in the wheel last week at all from Cal. They tried early, and then that was we blew it up, and then that was that. I mean, I would have kept testing it because if I'm facing Florida State, I don't believe they can consistently do it well until they prove they can.
Yeah, what's interesting is on a couple of shots that they took with the wheel, one of which is near the end zone, and it was like a 10, 15-yard pass. We didn't switch. We didn't pass it off where the slot defender gives it to the outside corner.
Right,
Slot defender it's like, that's your man. That's your responsibility.
Just stay on him, dude.
We ain't doing none of this switcheroo stuff. There's no lane merging, lane shifting. It's just that's your dude. Follow him and don't get beat, please. And you know what? If that's what it takes, that's what it takes. But also, I think people and players and talent matter. Edwin Joseph plays fast. It hasn't been beaten out of him yet. Maybe that's the indictment of the staff. But like you see somebody who plays at 100 miles an hour, it's reminiscent of some of the better, members of the secondary we've had where, look, man, I believe this is going to happen. I know this is my assignment, so this is where I'm going to go. And I would rather if you make mistakes, just please do that today. None of this, let me get up to the point of making the tackle and then freeze. We've got a guy who does that often, and it drives me batty. Just play. Just play.
Big picture conversation here, and I see a question in the chat. Hillbilly Reefer with a great handle.
That's such a good name.
Yeah. If this offense struggles again, I don't put everything on DJU. Do you think Mike will make a change? And then he writes, "Go Braves." I can't stamp the last part of that, but I would just say that the answer is no, not next week for sure. I think this is this, in my opinion, will likely be the last 2 games that you see DJU this year. This game and the Clemson game. You would not, I don't believe. First of all, just on the record, so you guys know, I would have already made a change. I've said that repeatedly, and I think it's for obvious reasons. It's not even about playing the blame game. It's not about saying, hey, DJ doesn't do this well, doesn't do that well. We've documented he doesn't do much well. But the point would be he's behind a sieve of an offensive line in pass pro. And I would, at that point, opt to have the more mobile quarterback that gives me a fighting chance when things break down. By the way, that's exactly what SMU did. They opted for Kevin Jennings, who's more mobile. That's what he does. He can run around. It was because early in the season, even against Nevada, they had a hard time protecting the quarterback at SMU. The offensive line was not doing a good job in pass protection. So at some point, they opted to go to the more mobile quarterback, which is just a very logical step to take when you've got a guy who can't get out of the way of a pass rush. And DJ, who I think has been hurt since game one, and I've said this because he has not looked like himself, and he's never been an elite runner. He's never been an elite quarterback out of the pocket in terms of shifting and buying time and doing those kinds of things. So I don't want to paint the picture that this is a guy that's suddenly lost his fastball. No, he's never been great at that, but he certainly wasn't to the level he is now, which is really immobile as immobile gets. It's Peyton Manning-esque immobile. So, this is why you look at something like that and you go, it just doesn't work. It's a square peg, round hole. You've got to find a way to buy more time, and when plays break down, still be able to produce a non-negative play. Like every breakdown does not have to result in a sack. It does here. Every breakdown now results in 2nd and 17, 3rd and 18, those kinds of things. I think with Brock, at least, he's able to get you back to the line of scrimmage, buy some time, throw it away, 2nd and 10, 2nd and 8. Might even scramble for 7 because he is a pretty athletic kid. So you just got a better chance at surviving those negative plays where either your offensive line doesn't communicate, pre-snap isn't properly protected, because I think we're struggling in that area too. Whatever it is that's not being read, you give yourself a fighting chance. And so if he wasn't going to make the move up till now, I don't think Mike makes the move today. Well, you wouldn't just decide after today, no matter how poorly DJ plays, he might play well. Let's hope. Let's knock on wood. I'm holding out hope that happens. But if he plays poorly, how fair is it to go to Brock Glenn before you face arguably the 2nd or 3rd best defensive line in the country next week? That would be a reason for Brock to want to transfer at this point. I mean, he's already been put in a couple of untenable situations through no fault of his own. Now he's watched Saturday after Saturday of incompetence and wondered what it takes for him to get in the game. And then you would roll him out there against Clemson, where you're outmanned and outmatched up front. Would seem unreasonable. So I think that what you'll see now is DJ starts today, might have a chance to play a good game. He might. And then he'll start against Clemson. The Clemson game, we're going to get ahead of ourselves here for a second, is going to be a disaster. There's not really a path to victory in the Clemson game. So when DJ looks terrible in that game and is just it's an onslaught, you're free the following game. At that point, your season's gone. You're able to go to Brock Glenn, which is what I'm projecting based on the question to happen.
Yeah, and well, to me, I felt like last week there was a 0% chance that there was a plan for Brock. No inside information this week. I feel like it's 10%. Mike was at least aggressive this week when he talked about everything is under review. Like, he doesn't usually say things like that. So I wonder what that means personnel-wise in terms of changes. And maybe Hilton Head Knoll here in the chat has something that, Mike's done this before. This would not be a tendency breaker. This would be a tendency confirmer. Chance we see the Wildcat is the question. I hope that there's a great chance we see the Wildcat today. You have personnel that can be a dual threat specifically for the Wildcat. You have never been in a better position as the offensive play caller for Florida State to call a Wildcat play and have to force a defense to play you honest than you do with Cam Davis. I don't understand why we haven't seen that. I will say this, though. Last week against Cal, they were in several third mediums, and they converted at least 2 of them, but it might have been 3, 3rd and 5 pluses with run calls, like straight-up run calls. So they might feel like they don't need it. They might feel like they don't need it because they've got a little bit of bravado to themselves. I know it sounds crazy from last week, but they got good returns on called runs on 3rd and 5. I think they were setting up for 4th downs. But at any rate, I would love to see the Wildcat. I would love to see that as a wrinkle. It does not have to be your offense the way it was in the ACC championship game last year. That was the only reason you won the football game. You scored enough because of the Wildcat. But I would love to see it as a wrinkle. Give a defense something else to think about rather than knowing that they can triangulate the position of the quarterback and not be afraid of him doing anything with his legs to hurt you.
Yeah, they pin their ears on every opportunity. Teams pin their ears, and they know where he's going to be. They know exactly where he's going to be. And DJ, unfortunately for him, is really just not able to get out from under that. I do think he was much better at it at Oregon State. He also had better personnel at Oregon State. He was better at it at Clemson. He was never great there. He was inconsistent. It's what drove them nuts, but he was better at getting out of the way and even making a few plays with his legs. Many Florida State fans will remember the game that he played right here at Doak Campbell Stadium, and he played very, very well against Florida State that day. Now, I wasn't in love with our defense, but he made play after play, and he made some plays with his legs. So we really thought coming into the season, and there have been, and it sounds like a piling on effect, but there have really been some unfortunate developments in this season. Now, we have fun with it all the time. We talk about there have been issues and all those things. But I also think that Mike's been a little unlucky. The offensive line, which hasn't been great, has also been banged up. And, I say this, thank goodness, I know Ira's there. A buddy of mine was on the same flight Ira was on yesterday going out to Dallas. And so we'll have to check in very closely with the pregame warm-up reports and find out who's healthy, who's not. It seems like every week we have another injury revealed on that offensive line or somewhere that it's going to be of importance. None of us could have known, for example, a couple weeks back with Darius, right? I mean, that was nuts. But they've had a series. Obviously, Byers has been out this whole time, and there have been thoughts that maybe he'll be making his way back. But you're going to watch closely because while those two guys aren't elite, they're starters for a reason, and they give you a much better chance to succeed. Look along that entire front, and we'll find out what's going to happen there. But also he's had, I think the guy that was going to make the biggest difference at wide receiver, you lost in spring. We've talked about that. That's devastating. That changed what your offense looked like. Then before the season even began, you had another key injury. Hakeem, who I think was emerging in camp with that bad hamstring pull. He ends up missing the first few games, and really the rest of the last 2 weeks of practice he missed. Now that's out of the, cat's out of the bag. We can talk about that. So he's had a series of things where you're just like, well, never could have projected that Kyle Morlock would drop every pass I schemed open for him. There's just a lot of weird things like that. Now they're a little banged up at running back. It's a little frustrating. So let's see. I don't know. They're due for some good luck is a nice way of saying it. They really are. They're due to get some guys back, we think, and just hope that they can get in some kind of a rhythm here against the SMU defense. That's not great. Now, conversely, Tom, I think the one fear I have about Florida State's defense today, I like them to win the physical matchup up front. We talked about that to start the show. But I do know, and we've watched it happen, and we'll see. But SMU they do play tempo. They will play in a hurry.
They will. They've got to win on first down to do that. Of course, that's where that's a key down. They're awkward too in their formations. So again, if I'm SMU, I'm trying to dial up the tempo a lot because hidden in the performance against Cal last week were an awful lot of snaps where the defense is not ready as the ball is being snapped to the quarterback. And that happens in tempo to a lot of teams, but not on the level that it happened to us last week. There's a couple of red flags are second and forevers, third and forevers, fourth and forevers being converted against you, some breakdowns in the secondary. That's new. Like I actually thought the front seven or front six did a better job of communicating last week. And what killed them were some coverage breakdowns behind themselves. Like, again, coming off of Cal's own goal line, you call a zone there. And, of course, they find a hole in the zone.
I've never been able to run a zone.
Well, it's also stones to call 3 or 4 straight passes off of your own half-yard line if you're Wilcox.
That kid's a pretty good quarterback, though. I don't think he's afraid. I like that kid.
So Mendoza can make more throws than Jennings has. I'll bring these stats here.
A lot more throws. This
is something you'll see on the site. It's something you'll have heard on the JCS yesterday. But I'm tempting fate, I suppose. But Kevin Jennings is 0 for 7 this year on deep shots. And if you combine last year and this, he's 3 out of 25 on throws 20-plus yards down the field. So resume-wise, he doesn't have that throw, whereas Mendoza, the kid from Cal, most certainly has that throw. And the weapons that Cal had at receiver were far more talented for me, and tight end. Dyches is a hybrid player, but that looks like an NFL body, that particular player. They don't have that at SMU. They might have a good tight end, but even last week, Endries was Cal's do everything tight end. They never targeted him, or Florida State won that battle, whatever it was. He only ended up with 2 catches for 24 yards. So it'll be interesting to me how SMU dials up to try and stretch the field or stretch the defense. But you've got to be prepared when it's 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 5 to be ready. And whatever the defensive call is, because if we're going to try and communicate through all that stuff late, that's where Lashley can flex his football IQ.
Yeah, and the Cal fans, if you go back and look at those guys that cover the Cal team, a little frustrated with their head coach last week in that game against Florida State. They felt like it was one of those games where he'd like to have it back. He some things that he forgot to do.
They abandoned what they were all about.
They sure did. They sure did.
What's interesting about that is I felt like we ran more of their stuff than they did. With split zone, our first drive looked more like a carbon copy of their stuff. I don't know. You know what? If we have a weird formation where there's 4 dudes split out wide to the right and there's a weird tunnel screen, I'm going to start saying that Mike is just looking at the opponent film and saying, yeah, I like that play. Let's run that one this week.
We'll run what you run.
We're going to run what you run, but we'll see. It's just, again, for the defense, it's about Farmer continuing to eat. I think he's got a huge opportunity to do that today. I would think you're going to see, you saw it last week again. That's 3 games where you see a lot of 4-3, 3 linebackers on the field. I don't know that SMU is going to have a bunch of 3-4 wide personnel. So I think you might see a lot of 3 linebacker looks, or what Fuller could do today. If you watch how BYU was so successful with just 3 down linemen, you could deploy Patrick Payton in a spy role and make him a little bit more multiple as a rusher and a spy. I know that people cringe when a pass rusher specialist is put in as a spy. I think Payton's actually pretty damn good at it. And Jennings is not nearly as elusive as the previous quarterbacks you faced in the front half of the schedule. So there are options for the defense. I wonder if they're going to test a 3 down lineman look first and then see what their options are. But Adam Fuller can go a few different ways today.
Yeah, and I think really you would want to have Blake Nicholson on the field as much as possible. He's really good in coverage, and he's also fast enough sideline to sideline to make plays if you used him in that role as well, Tom. So he's got to be out there quite a bit. He's emerging as a player. Blake is. He's not all the way there yet, not big enough, strong enough yet, but he's getting there.
Well, and that's another discussion that we had earlier this week, which is it's important. If you're a redshirt freshman or a freshman and you don't have a lot of exposure time, here's your chance. And if you fail and learn, that's okay. It could cost us the game. A breakdown by Edwin Joseph or Nicholson or Quindarius Jones, or insert your player here. A breakdown by a young player on defense could cost you the game today. And I say it's worth it. I think it's absolutely worth it because of you're playing the long game here for development of the program and getting these kids to be in a position where they can help you down the line. Because this year's goals about going to Charlotte are pretty much off the table. I know it's mathematically not, but you've got to think about the long term here. And I'd rather have those guys making mistakes than 4th and 5th year players who have made the same mistakes for 2 and 3 years in a row.
Yeah, basically after the second loss, when we lost to Boston College, I said, well, it's time. I'm quick to punch, guys, so I'm letting you know now. I already know things are gone, so I was ready to roll. But Mike was not, and a lot of coaches are not. But I would have started flooding the offense and defensive depth chart with young players and giving them opportunities. I'm not saying starting them right away, but any chance I get to get them in a game, in a situation where they're going to garner some information that will help them grow, whether it's a late in the half sort of drive, opposing team starts on their own 15. All right, let's see what I can do with a couple of different personnel groupings here and get them some experience. Those kinds of things. You are beginning to see it. I think the fan base will feel an uptick in enthusiasm to watch what is a bad product and will not be a great product this year at any point. But you will watch when it's the young kids, especially when they're highly touted kids. They're kids that you knew coming in were the kinds of kids that were recruited by elite programs. You happen to win a few of those battles. Florida State hasn't won enough of those battles, duly noted, but they did win plenty of battles in the secondary with this talent. And you're starting to see those guys play, and they look the part. And you're seeing some other guys at various spots. I think people want to see. So, for example, Venus writes, do we see Danzy tonight? Sure hope so, right? I mean, you've got opportunities there, Tom. He plays a position where it doesn't matter that you're young. If you have a ton of speed and you can handle, I mean, even if it's just a package or two, like a couple of things that you need to be able to execute as a running back or a receiver, it's not that, it's not that hard to scheme something up like that for a player. I mean, we've seen it before, right? When you get a player who's ungodly fast, he's running 4.3, he's running 4.4, something like that. You just run simple 9. Let's just throw it as far as we can and see if that kid outruns the guy covering him. I mean, it's sometimes it's that simple. Sometimes it's an end around or a reverse or whatever it might be where you get that speed and space. You'd like to see some more of that, Tom. I think you have to. Yeah. What are you waiting for at tight end? What are you waiting for at tight end? Your tight end doesn't block. Neither of your tight ends block, okay? And they're not exactly killing it as receivers. So why wouldn't you want to see a Williams or a Landon Thomas?
Yeah, none of your 3 tight ends block with any consistency. There was a chance for Jackson West last week in the second end around where he just olays, and I can't fathom.
Yes, it hurts your feelings. It's hard to watch, but there's an example. There's an example. It would be, to me, I mean, I really hope you start to see them infuse the same mindset you're seeing on defense on offense. And I think that's true of Micah. I think that's true of Elijah Moore. Now, I get the sense, Tom, you tell me what you think. I don't get the feeling that Mike is very comfortable yet with putting Elijah Moore specifically in games. I don't, maybe he just doesn't have a clue with the playbook yet. It's possible. That's a big jump, but it certainly seems like they're hesitant to get him out there because I think physically he would have jumped off the page to you in a way that none of the other receivers do. And you would have said, I want to get him in the game at some point, get a playmaker out there if you could, but they haven't even really tried. So
you can go back 6-7 weeks and Mike is so furious with the receivers ahead of Elijah Moore in the depth chart for not making plays. And he said that Elijah Moore is not afraid of the moment. Elijah Moore is not afraid to go make a play, but he's got to learn a lot of things, which tells me to your point that, the playbook, he's not even close to ready. But as you said, when Xavier Worthy was younger at Texas, they knew he was fast as hell, and they said, go keep running. We know that nobody's got your speed, so we're just going to throw it up to you. And you know what? Even if it doesn't work, that safety is going to be so afraid of you. Anytime that you touch the field, it's going to change the way he plays. It's going to change the way he looks at a 12 and in front of him. Because if you're running next to that receiver at the break, he's so scared of you that it's going to influence something else, and you're going to impact the game. For Elijah Moore, not his skill set, although quick aside, I would love to have seen that with Jalen effing Lucas at some point. You've got a quarterback who can throw it as far as anybody in the country, and you got a dude who can run about as fast as anybody in the country, but we never really got to see that, did we? Good Lord. But with Elijah Moore, it's red zone. That would be his place. I don't need you to worry about much more than slot fade or fade. And then from there, let's just throw the ball up and see who's a better man and who's a stronger man. I think you're going to win in that situation because you've got ball skills. Like, you can find home. Yeah. But he also has the body control, like all those. He's got those little dynamics to him. So if he gets out muscled by a 22-year-old, okay, no problem. But it's not because he was afraid of a sight adjust. Like, there's a way to get these guys out there if you really want to.
Without question, it really speaks to the approach that Mike has had to have because of the failures of the offseason and the failures of camp. What he's doing now in season is to try and concentrate on all these little small fires. I got to fix this over here, and it makes me forget about this stuff over here. And then I've got to fix this thing over here before I can get to that other thing. And, oh, by the way, you might be right. We do have to find a way to get this guy in the game. And, man, the personnel groupings haven't been ideal, but man, I can't block over here on the right side. I've got to figure out what to do with Byers out. Okay, well, here's what I'm going to do here. It just feels like Mike has had to constantly, and it's of his own doing, he's had to constantly now try to fix all of these fractures within the structure of this offense. And as he's sealing one, another fissure breaks over here, and then he's like, oh, and then he's running over there to fix that one. Oh, son of a bitch, there's another one, and he's running over there. And, it's just constantly feeling like you're behind, that you're never ahead, that you're always chasing, that you're always searching, that you're always frustrated, that you get a glimmer, you get a moment in time where something feels sealed and feels right, and then a new problem rears its ugly head. And what happens is we end up having this debate about what would best remedy in mass all of these fractures. Well, you always start with the quarterback. You always start that discussion with the quarterback. That's true in professional football. That's true in high school football. And it's certainly true in big-time college football, is that they get too much praise and too much of the blame. But that's where you start, because he's the most important player on the field. And so while we're arguing about that, there is all this other stuff that comes to mind in these discussions where you realize, well, Jalen Lucas is also out for the year, and he was a guy that could have really helped this football team. And even when he was in, they didn't properly utilize him, it doesn't feel like, or utilize him enough. But that's another one. When I was talking about the series of bad breaks for Mike, there's that one too. Add him to the list. But nobody's going to feel sorry for you, and nobody's coming to help you. So you've got to figure out a way to get the most out of what personnel you do have, whether you misevaluated it or not. And I'd like to see a day within this offense, and it's possible tonight against this SMU defense, where you hum a little bit, where there's a rhythm to what you're doing, that there is sort of a timing and a rhythm and a belief, and a play begets a play that makes sense off of that play. And you kind of understand that it's not a series of choices off of a sheet, but rather a cogent, put-together game plan. I've yet to see it.
Well, and that's where, Mike has said for a long time, we want to get that tempo going. And it's like, oh, God, if only, Mike, you knew somebody who had the ability to say, let's get the tempo going, and we finally did last week, though. In that first half.
In the game, they played with tempo.
They played with tempo. They got downhill. I know somebody asked a question, do we ever run slants? We do. It's just not a whole lot. But they hit some slants. They had the rhythm with the end around. Like for a moment there, I saw 2022's offense. It's like, look at this. A little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, some misdirection, getting up to the line quickly. But it was like once that momentum was broken, they thought they couldn't do it again. It's just so I wonder if they build off of that. That's why I say, to me, even though they only put up 14 points last week and they found a way not to score 20. I feel like there were at minimum 20 out there and they found a way to score 14. Thankfully, it was enough. But I wonder if they look back on the film and say, okay, we do finally have something to build off of. Because to me, that's the first time they've had a pulse. You had your first drive of the season in Dublin. Nothing really worked until desperation time in that game. The Boston College game was a tire fire, and ditto for Memphis. Last week, I saw a pulse of an offense. Maybe that's what Mike's talking about when he thinks that they might have a breakout day. And we all smirk because we're like, what does that even mean? Define breakout day. But if they get to 21, 24 points, you know what? That's a hearty handshake. Good effort, everybody. Way to go.
You really ought to be able to score that against SMU. If not, add to the level of frustration that we have felt after each and every game, including last week's win. Listen, we've modernized a lot of things over the years, and that includes self-care, gentlemen. We know the lotions for the face and the lotions for down there. Trim it up. Get that nose hair straightened out. We can't have craziness coming out of our ears. Do the right thing and save some money while you do it. Warchant for 20% off free shipping. That's the code Warchant. Go to manscaped.com. Use the promo code Warchant. Make sure your boys aren't sizzling. There's a salve for that. There's a beautiful salve for that. Oh, that's nice salve. Manscaped.com, code Warchant for 20% off.
Make sure your biscuits aren't burning. Woo, my biscuits are burning.
I won't give any personal affirmation to that, Tom, but I remember one time going down on vacation to the Keys. Did a lot of walking in the Keys. Bar to bar, hot spot to hot spot, water, all that. And in the midst of that Rousing time in the Keys. I could have used some of that manscaped.com salve. Was beginning to feel the wear and tear of my travails. So nowadays, I wouldn't have to worry about it. I'd go to my toiletry bag and say, thank goodness I brought you along, salve. Manscaped.com, code WARCHANT, 20% off. We'll come back and wrap up Warchant Game Day in just a moment.
Hey, this is Jay Green from Hotel Indigo Tallahassee. Can I stop and say thank you? Thank you for telling your guests to stay with us. Thank you for hosting your corporate meetings and social events in our rooftop meeting space. Thank you for hanging out with us on FSU football game days. Believe it or not, this sales guy isn't selling anything. I just want to say thank you. But if you've never seen our rooftop and I can ever help, give us a call, 850-755-9011. We are Hotel Indigo Tallahassee. Welcome.
We all know that home-cooked meals are so much better for you, but you don't always have the time to pull it off, especially in football season. But with HelloFresh handling all of the meal planning, the shopping, and most of the prep, it's easier than ever to get dinner on the table. Plans change and life gets busy. That's why HelloFresh lets you easily customize your delivery from week to week. You could tailor everything to your schedule by adjusting your delivery date or skip a week if you're not able to cook at home or you're just going to be on the road and traveling. Easily customize your meals with protein or veggie swaps as well. And don't forget, you can check out HelloFresh Market for more delicious add-on items if you want to mix it up and jazz it up for your weekly deliveries. Football season is absolutely nuts from a workflow standpoint. This is where simplicity really can come in handy. It saves you time because every minute counts in football season. This is where HelloFresh has saved me time. HelloFresh sending things directly to my door, minimal prep, cooking fresh ingredients, things that are good for my nutrition. It takes stress off my plate and puts healthy food on my plate. That's why I love HelloFresh. For free breakfast for life, go to HelloFresh.com/freewarchant. One free breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life just by going to HelloFresh.com/freewarchant. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit.
Shout out to all of you watching the show in Dallas, Fort Worth, hopefully enjoying your time. There was a time, in fact, that Tom Lang and myself were in Dallas, enjoying a good time prior to Florida State's win over Oklahoma State. And it was a backyard barbecue, buddy, from a wonderful Airbnb that you had. And Pops was in town. Everybody was in town. We did it up right. Matt and Kelly, remember we had that grill going. We had the all-day IPA flowing. It was a good time in Dallas, Fort Worth. So I tip the cap, root for all of you to have a blast. Hopefully bring back a victory. If you're there in Dallas, Fort Worth watching, a good day to you guys. Appreciate you. Go Noles. Obviously, we're rooting for that. I love that area. I've had a lot of good times there over the years. And good food, lots to do, plenty to see. And obviously, hopefully, good football tonight.
Amazing produce too, man. That's the one thing about Texas. I've been out there quite a bit in my younger years. The produce, specifically the jalapenos, they're different.
Give me some of them there jalapenos, would you?
Man, they're as spicy as they get in the country for obvious reasons. But let's hope that Dallas is good. I think it's University Park, technically, is where SMU is located. It's essentially Dallas. They wear hats that say Dallas. They wore a uniform last week that said Dallas. They've been at home for a month. It's very annoying, but let's hope that it's our home away from home again. You know, this is a team that when you see the box score, and if you only read the box score, you go, we don't have a chance. They dropped 66 points on TCU. Wow. If you watch the game, or even if you look at the line score and the game summary, where you see 3 defensive touchdowns / special teams touchdowns and 1 drive that was punched in from the 1-yard line, and then you realize that TCU had more yards per play. When you realize that SMU in their 2 power games have not even averaged 5 yards per play, you start to say, how the hell did they get to 66? Well, TCU's defense looks like it did last year against Colorado. Remember that game?
Those two, wasn't that 2 years ago?
No, it was last year. When we hosted LSU. It was our game day for.
That's right.
They started that day, and you knew within the first drive, oh God, Colorado's going to drop 50 today, maybe 60 if they want to. TCU
like ago now.
It in a lot of ways it is, but
it does. I mean,
you know, for this program was in a very different place. They were in the middle of winning 19 straight at that point, and we're trying to win 2 straight today.
19 straight.
We're trying to get within a game of 500 today. That's what we're looking to do. There's an opportunity here. I'm not saying that SMU doesn't pack some type of punch. Yeah, they've got threats on offense, but man, this ain't a team that drops 60. Don't look at the box score and be fooled. You've got a real opportunity today to get some stops and get off the field.
66-42, special teams touchdown, 51-yard fumble return touchdown, pick six, and a 1-yard drive. So there you go. That's a lot of points. That's 21, 28 points off of nonsense. So yeah, I agree with that. I will say, however, that observation's fair, but SMU's offense is better than Cal's offense. And so you're going to be tested, and I think you're going to be tested a little bit better. Rhett Lashley's simply a very, very good play caller, and he puts his players in positions to succeed. He always has. I've admired his work. I think he's a good offensive mind, and I think that he'll have a little something up his sleeve today. Now, the one thing that Cal and SMU have in common on offense is that neither of their offensive lines are any good. So I think that's the area. I do believe that now you would argue that Cal's quarterback is better than Jennings, and I would say that that's accurate. But I think that schematically, I really like what Lashley does more than what Cal does, and I think it leads to points. It leads to opportunity. It leads to tiring defenses out if you can't if you can't win first down. If you lose first down on defense, you're going to be out there a lot, and they're gonna wear you down.
Yeah, no, agree. There is a fatigue effect potential here. There's no doubt. You got to hold the ball. You got to value the football. That's the argument against tempo, actually. If we're talking about why use tempo, well, because we need to get into a damn rhythm. The argument against it is, well, I can't trust us to be ahead of the chains. So if I run tempo, then I'm staring at 36 minutes of possession for the opposition again. So that's where you're stuck a little bit between a rock and a hard place. But again, I think this O-line is gettable for Florida State's defensive front. And, Cal, at least to this point in the season, both of them haven't played murderer's row. The best opponent either team has played has been SMU taking on BYU. But, at 5.1 yards per play for the season, SMU's 88th in the country in yards per play.
Yeah.
Now, they did turn to Jennings in the last two games because they knew that they needed a mobile quarterback. But even against BYU, I mean, it's not like he lit the world on fire in his scheduled drive.
33 for 140 yards.
Right.
That's when they made the decision to permanently go to him.
Right. And he's, well, and for Jennings' sake, he's completing 63% of his passes, but he's completing an 80% clip on screens and swing passes. Mm-hmm. So again, there's opportunities here. If Florida State defensively can just trigger and get downhill, you've got a chance to make plays in the backfield. But if that first guy misses, you better rally to the ball against number one in SMU uniform. That's Brashard Smith. That's the guy. They've got some other running backs that are, okay and elusive, but that is the game breaker. They don't really have another guy that lifts the lid. They might have a weapon up the seam in their tight end, but there's one guy you got to key on here, and they love to get him the ball early on. The sooner they get it in his hands, the better, and that's where Lashley's smart. But, Florida State can have a downhill approach today.
Yeah, and Tom is referencing somebody I alluded to start the show, and if you're just looking at the stats, you may not see the numbers other than the 8-catch day against Nevada where he had well over 120 yards receiving. I brought up R.J. Maryland. You old-timers like me will remember Russell Maryland was a defensive lineman. His son is the tight end at SMU, and he's athletic, very athletic, 6'4", 240 plus, can move. I bring him up and I hyper-focus on opposing tight ends all the time. We did it last week against Cal because we were worried about both their tight ends. Turns out their coach forgot about their tight ends. But I don't think that Lashley will. He's going to look at the film and go, oh, well, I got a guy that can really move. I got a guy that can run and can get open and is a problem. And you seem to have problems with guys like that at tight end. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a go here. So, yeah, I worry about it today. That's something that I really will concentrate on early.
Here's the thing. Is this a trend? P. Simpson with a comment. The inability to get off the field on 3rd and 4th down will be what leads SMU to a blowout win, unfortunately. No reason to even mention FSU's offense. Okay, so that trend, is it one? The question, is it a trend that 3rd and long is going to be a problem? That was a weakness of Florida State's last week. 2nd and forever, 3rd and forever, 4th and forever. But Mendoza has a better arm, and he's a more accurate arm than Jennings.
Big time.
So if they're in 3rd and obvious, I hope he throws the ball. I hope he does, because he'll put it in danger, I believe. But it's almost weakness against weakness. A recent weakness for Florida State is coverage breakdowns or just getting beaten one-on-ones in third and obvious. Can they get off the field better today? That is a legitimate question because they were awful at it last week. You could have flipped that game on its head 3 or 4 different times, and you never got off the field when you could have.
Yeah, Christopher writes, do we really trust Norvell to make changes on his staff? Firing buddies is a tough thing to do. Failure to do so could mean disaster for him. Christopher, I get where your head's at, man. On a day like today where we do Warchant Game Day, we're largely concentrated on the matchup tonight. Most fans, however, have gone where your head's at, and that is to look to next year, look to this offseason, look to the changes that have to be made because they believe, like you do, clearly by the nature of your question, that this season's a wash. I will tell you, and I'll give you an answer on that. I believe that he's not going to have a choice. And I think there's already overwhelming evidence that suggests at least a couple of changes are coming. Let's see how the season plays out. A game like tonight could go a long way in deciding how many changes are made. You go out to Dallas tonight and struggle for, you don't play well, let's say, against SMU, and it's not a competitive game. Every one of these kinds of games add up to, I think, a larger and more significant change in the offseason for this staff. I already believe he's got to make a lot of changes. I already believe he's got to make bare minimum, I would say 3, but that's bare minimum to me. I think Mike probably, like most coaches, doesn't want to have to do it, but you've got some really gross things happening within your program in terms of what I think can be nothing short of incompetence in some ways. So when you see these trends in which we talk about the same thing hurting you over and over and over and over again and doesn't get fixed, and when you're having conversations each week about the lack of communication or an inability to cover a crosser or a wheel route, or when you have constant complaints about finishing the deal and recruiting, you have to be able to self-scout, look in the mirror and say, I've got to make changes. I got to make improvements in these areas because ultimately everything does fall at the head coach's feet. And I believe that he will have to make those changes. Some of it will be by his own volition. Some of it will be because I think in no uncertain terms, you kind of get told by the results of these games what has to happen.
Okay, so I don't know that I brought it up on the show this week. I meant to, but, obviously there's a big storm. I got texts. Little old me got texts from a couple of power brokers. And the university power brokers, and people who would be not in the room, where they would at least be consulted because, they bring something to the.
They give a lot of money. Just say it. Yes.
Yeah. During the post-game show saying, hey man, what the, and look, that means if I get that text, about 50 people before me got that text. So I was like, ooh, okay. To your point, the people whose opinion will matter, I think will have an opinion voiced. They won't hold back in that situation. And that's the wild thing is you've got to a place, even in after a win in 4 games, where the honeymoon's over from 29 straight. The honeymoon is over and tough decisions are going to be, the hand is going to be forced for tough decisions to be made. My thing is, I'm glad that there's enough passion for that because that means that there would be enough funding for that. You can't have that passion without backing it up with the funding.
And apathy is a dangerous, dangerous thing. You can have a great passion, a love, an extreme love, or a hate, but you can't have apathy. Apathy is complete indifference, and you watch people go off and do other things with their weekend, and that's a whole different issue. So that's the problem with losses. That's the problem with losses where you have better talent than your opponent. It doesn't reflect very well on the head coach, a guy who had garnered, rightfully so, an awful lot of trust and belief and I think real passion. People felt strongly, rightfully, after 19 straight wins and an undefeated season, a return to atop the conference with a championship, that we had found the guy and that there was no turning back and that the climb continued and the next big step would be to be in this playoff this year and to continue to edge ever closer towards trying to have the personnel that could win you a national championship. This has been a catastrophic step back. Let's hope tonight doesn't add to the many reasons why people are shaken to their core by what they've seen in regards to their belief in this head coach, right? I mean, we don't need any more of that. The season is not going to be what we wanted it to be, but it does not have to be an unmitigated disaster. Like you can go 6-6, you can go 7-5, but the only way to have that happen, it's still not ideal. I get it. It would still be a disappointing result. Any of the records that I just stated. But you'd be bowling. I do think the extra practices for the young players and the extra time that you get when you go to a bowl for all of those young players you're trying to infuse into what next year can be would be huge. You can't get to that bowl that they're fighting to get to. And again, I understand that is a very, very low bar for Florida State to reach right now, especially on the heels of the expectations coming off the undefeated season. But nonetheless, the reality is where we are. This is the pragmatic approach. You can't get to that, though, Tom, without a win here tonight. This is one of the games you have to win because you're not going to beat Clemson, and I dare say you're not going to beat Miami on the road, and it seems highly unlikely that you're going to beat Notre Dame on the road. So at this point, you already have the 3 losses. That's 6. It starts to add up really quick. You can't lose tonight, or else we're looking at a team that doesn't go bowling, and now you're looking at, again, anger, frustration, and dare I say, in due time, unfortunately, some apathy seeping in.
Engagement level is something that's always important when you're looking at veterans and you're looking at, the roster. You're always mining when there's a disappointing time of the season like this one. Are they engaged? Do they care? And I hate that, but that's something that must be done, especially when there were certain efforts made on defense against Memphis that you thought, man, individual moments. Now, the defense wasn't the reason we lost that game. But individual moments where you go, do they care? I'm not trying to hold a parade and throw confetti at people down Monroe Street, but I was impressed last week with what I saw specifically from the defense. Patrick Payton showed up. It's almost like, Jeff, he had a preseason of 3 games, and then, okay, here we go. And he was full speed last week. He was engaged throughout. Marvin Jones Jr. finally made some plays. Does that unlock a confidence level that sees him making more plays? Josh Farmer has been consistent this year. I believe he's been consistent. I think even the Dublin game where the whole defensive line had a bad day, you're still seeing that dude run 30 and 40 yards down the field pursuing things because of breakdowns on the perimeter, breakdowns with our second-level defenders. That guy has been engaged all season. I think he's been a leader for you, and he was dominant last week. But you saw engagement level. That's important because when you hit the road, I feel like if you're feeling wishy-washy, that shows all the more when you're away from home. Like you get lazier when you get away from home. But what I saw last week was a team that is sticking together defensively, especially that group in the front 4. Here's an opportunity to put some more good film out there to go make yourself some money when the season is over, and I think they might.
Enjoy your Saturday, my friends. We want to thank Ben Spicer for producing the show as always. We want to thank all of you. Once again, our goodwill and thoughts are with all of you guys dealing with aspects of the storm and all the things that occurred during it. Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate that. I never take it for granted, nor does Tom. I know that we love getting together and having these little conversations on game day. We've made a commitment to doing all of these at 9 a.m. for the most part this year in studio where we can get together well in advance of a 7 or 8 o'clock kickoff, any of those things. So it's good, and it helps to vet these things. And we appreciate you people in the chat as well, having the conversation. I'll glance over there from time to time and see that conversation and appreciate that everybody's either here on board and certainly talking amongst each other. We're all passionate about the Noles. We'd like to see certainly this team take another step forward and get their second win of the year. The back-to-back wins, my God, I don't know what we do with back-to-back wins. Feels like eons ago that we won 19 of these in a row. And we certainly want to thank our pregame show sponsor, Hotel Indigo, Tallahassee College Town. You know that if you're a guest or you're a business and you're coming into Tallahassee, you want to stay at the Hotel Indigo. Great group there. They're a big part of the Noel family and what we do here at Warchant, the Jeff Cameron Show. Make sure that you call Jay Green if you want to get together with them for any of the remaining home games. 850-755-9011. Hotel Indigo Tallahassee, welcome to our neighborhood. Good work out of you, Tom. And I think for now we'll sign off and we'll get geared up to watch a ton of football today, and then it culminates tonight with Florida State SMU. So
W.
W's
coming. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you got us winning the game. I do not. Although I don't think it's a mountain too high. I think Florida State could easily win this game. So we shall see. Again, thanks to all of you guys. And until next time, be well and go Noles. Peace.